Massive Leaf signings are imminent as we have some huge news to go over today as a brand new report has dropped, revealing some massive information surrounding Brad Treliving's plans, and this is way better than we initially thought. We're going to break down those reports and discuss it. This changes everything for the outlook of this offseason going forward. Before we get into it all, if you're a part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content. Your guys' support has been unbelievable, so make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you guys are enjoying the content, we're on the road to the big goal of 25,000 subscribers. You guys have been absolutely fantastic, been absolute beasts, so thank you guys for that. Darius, let's dive into it. Ton of things to go over today. A very interesting turn of events. Now, we're talking about two key players. Now, signings are imminent at this point, and this report is very important for the rest of this offseason, especially to get these things clued up early. And James Myrtle dropped this bombshell here. John Tavares and Matthew Knies extensions could be done in the next week or two. Now, we knew that Matthew Knies' extension was going to get done, and the goal was to get done before free agency opens here in a couple of weeks, or I guess 3 or 4 weeks, by the end of this month, 3 weeks. But John Tavares, it seems now that all signs point to him being extended, that the deal is going to get done here in the next couple of weeks. So there's a real world now and a likely world where John Tavares, Matthew Knies are both Maple Leafs for the long term, the foreseeable future, before, and that's confirmed before free agency opens up. So then the Leafs will have a pretty clear set structure of what their team is looking like for the most part before free agency opens. And this is very big news. And for the first time, it's been confirmed now essentially that both these guys will be returning. But the big news here is not free agency before that even opens.
Yeah, and I think that obviously these guys are going to be re-signing, if they do re-sign, which I think Matthew Knies is a no-brainer at this point, in the next couple of weeks, obviously, because the draft is coming up and free agency. They're going to have to get it done before they hit free agency and offer sheet territory for Matthew Knies. But we're going to get into it later in this video. I don't think we're going to get into offer sheet territory. They're going to get this done, I think, in pretty short order coming up here. And one thing that this initial report tells me is that they've already dealt with Mitch Marner. They know that he's leaving, and they've probably already done everything that they can in terms of a sign and trade. And now that they're obviously pivoting over to getting Matthew Knies done, which I still think is the #1 priority. And I still think that, it's definitely not 90-10 that John Tavares is coming back. Yes, they had positive conversations, all of that. I think it's closer to 50-50 still. I still think the Leafs are trying to figure out what they want to do in terms of retooling their team. And we're going to get to it later in the video. A lot of people don't think that you can win with John Tavares. If you're talking about changing the DNA, why would you bring back John Tavares? I still think John Tavares is a great player, and if he's making less and takes a hometown discount by all accounts, he will. That's what we've been told. I think that he has a spot on this team and he can make this team better. So yes, you want to change the DNA to an extent, but you don't want to let a player walk just for the sake of letting him walk. I do think you retain John Tavares if it's at the right dollar amount, and because he does really want to return and he wants to win a Stanley Cup here.
Yeah, and again, James Myrtle, I'm going to go the other side. I'm like 90% sure that John Tavares is going to be, coming back. We heard a bunch of rumblings. James Myrtle now saying this. I'm gonna take James Myrtle what it is. But again, we're hearing some rumblings about numbers. We'll dive into a minute here. The Leafs remain confident they'll sign Matthew Knies as well. I think that one is more expected and more, confirmed. Reasonable second contract. What that number is, we're still yet to know whether it's a bridge deal or a long-term deal, and that's going to be the biggest thing for him. But this is very interesting because you can see this here on the JD Bunker show. Myrtle says something like the Tanev contract is the right ballpark for Tavares with deferred money. Myrtle thinks the Leafs can get Tavares for 6 years under $4 million AAV. Then you talk to Berube about his role. He can't be the 2C in the playoffs, which probably, depending on how he does this year, a 6 by 4.5, I would do that, or even 6'4", I would do that in a heartbeat. And there's just been a lot of smoke around the John Tavares thing. I think he's going to return, but if you are right, he could change his mind. If he ends up wanting a little bit more money, that's where things start to get very murky. I think Knies is all but done at this point. Tavares are still working with 6 years, $4 million, basically the same as the Chris Tanev deal, a bit different, of course, a $500,000 per year difference. This would be a perfect deal, at least in my eyes, for the Leafs. Of course, there might be some. I think Tavares is good enough to not have to go to Robidas Island later on in his career, but maybe he'll be a third or fourth line center. This is a very cheap amount that would allow them and open them up to getting a lot of other guys. And if you save, let's say, $2 million per year on John Tavares, so instead of the 6 that he's expected to get, you get 4. That opens up an immediate spot to even get a guy like Brandon Tanev that just covers his salary completely, which is a great depth for in the bottom 6. So it opens up a ton. And at $4 million, if he's willing to do that, I think the Leafs would do a deal like this in a heartbeat, especially with the deferred money and the way their team is going right now and trying to win in a must-win in the next 2 to 3 years. We talk about really a 2-year window here for pure contention, and then of course they can always retool and go from there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that they have, like you said, the next 2 or 3 years to go after a Stanley Cup. And I think this is the most interesting part, that yes, John Tavares is getting older and all of that. But, when I say in previous videos that I don't want him to sign a long-term deal. It's because I don't want him to retire on Robida Island, like you brought up. But that's more of just my personal feelings. If you can get this done for under $4 million, and yes, he does end up on Robida Island, even though I don't think he does. He scored 40 goals last year. He's still going to be a player. If he wants to play, I think he's going to play into his 40s, but maybe not with the Toronto Maple Leafs. But that's a conversation for another time. But if you can get that contract done, then like you said, you can add to the bottom six. You can use a lot of the salary cap space that you're going to be saving with Mitch Marner out the door. Possibly either via free agency or via trade, go out and get a second line center, a guy who has that foot speed, who can play those second line center minutes. John Tavares can then drop to either the wing on the second line or where I think he should be third line center, because that's a great third line center option, a guy who can still score 40 goals and obviously play on your power play, still going to get that time on ice up. So it's going to be interesting to see what they end up doing and how they kind of formulate this lineup, because if you get John Tavares for under $4 million, that is great value. You can do a lot with that cap space that you are saving. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And again, I think that you can win with John Tavares in this new role, especially if he's making less. You can use the remaining money to build up the team around him. And honestly, he's a good pro. He's a guy who wants to be here, wants to win here. I'm very hesitant personally about, shipping guys off that actually genuinely want to be here and want to win here. So that's a guy who wants to. Could you win with him making 11 million? No, right? Like we saw that the team was not successful with the salary cap structure of that time, but things are about to change. And I think that you do keep him on the team still has great use. And if he's playing third line minutes, he's going to be great in that role.
Yeah, and obviously, despite his age, there's not many other player. I mean, there is no other player you're going to get on the market for 4 million AAV that will even come close to matching what we expect John Tavares to be capable of. You can see this here. If John Tavares signs for around 9 million to stay, or 4 million to stay in Toronto, I will defend his honor forever. Despite a massive first contract with Toronto, he took less money to come back home. Back-to-back discounts to play in Toronto was unheard of in this market. And regardless of the sentiment and, of course, whether or not he'll play the last 2 or 3 years of his career, this would just be a fantastic move for Brad Treliving. Like, this opens up an unbelievable amount of space for Brad Treliving in a world where, again, different players, different age, different points of their career. But if Sam Bennett's getting 10 million and you're getting John Tavares for 4, that leaves you with 6 million AAV. I mean, like, in theory, and this is kind of just speculation, that almost opens up. Of course, you need to pay a bit more, but that extra 6 million could go directly towards a guy like Nikolai Ehlers or somebody like that who can. And then you're having, who would you rather, John Tavares and Nikolai Ehlers or one of Sam Bennett? And that's the question that starts to come up. And of course, adding depth. This team has too many holes to fill to go all in on one guy who's 14 million. That's why we all assume Mitch Marner is going to leave. They have way too many holes now. You can't run it back with the same lineup you did last year. But there is the other side of, you can see here, I don't understand why the Leafs need to re-sign John Tavares. He's 34, no physicality. There are people on the other side of it. Granted, it is Sid Seixeiro, and he lives for, I guess, rage bait would probably be the best word to put it here. But at the same time, I think you can win a cup with John Tavares, not at his current salary, or his past salary, which makes sense. He's gotten older now. But at 4 million, that would be one of the biggest bargains in the league, assuming he even puts up 70 or 60% of what he did last year, even if you go back to the year before when he had a down year. So it makes sense to me. I think it makes all the sense in the world. And then regarding Matthew Knies, the big one here will be the difference between 8 years and a bridge deal. We don't have a ton of info surrounding that now, but as info comes out, we'll of course keep you up to date with it, because he is a beast and he is dominant, especially at his age. But I would assume he probably wants a bridge deal. But again, there hasn't been many rumblings of that. And I have a feeling we probably won't know until like hours before the deal, given how close to the chest they're keeping this specific incident, and or I guess this contract discussion rather, not an incident. But Tavares going to remain in Toronto would be my guess. And 4 years, or even if it's 4 years, but 6 years, 4 million, get it done.
Yeah, I think that John Tavares wants to be a Toronto Maple Leaf. He wants to stay in Toronto. He wants to retire in Toronto. And I think the Leafs organization do actually want him back, but it's in a different role, right? Like we have to think about it that way. He's not going to be making 11 anymore. He's not going to be the second line center. He's going to be in a new role, making less. He's still going to get power play time, doing the things that he does best, and he's going to be an effective player for them. And I think that you can win that way as long as you build up the team around him. We'll see what they do via trade or free agency. So it's going to be interesting. And like you mentioned, you can't give away $14 million to one player at this point in time. And it's not because he's not a great player. I think Mitch Marner's a great player. I don't know what exactly he's going to make. I feel like it's going to be ridiculous, and it's going to be a team like Anaheim. But, we know that doesn't work. Build up the team around him. And in terms of Matthew Knies, before we wrap up too, we don't have specifics on the contract length. Obviously, we know that he's pushing for a bridge deal so then he can make more money later down the road. But obviously, I think that is camp is probably asking for like 10 million over 8 years or something like that. So it kind of makes it worthwhile. But I think it's going to end up being a bridge deal, something that the Leafs I think can stomach, and then obviously he's going to make more money down the road. But that's fine for the time being. Bridge him, just get him under contract, make sure he's on the team rolling into the future.
Yeah, let us know down below what your thoughts are. He's an absolute animal, and hopefully he continue that play. But let us know down below what your thoughts are. Thank you guys for watching. See you later.